I have nowhere left to go, the woman whispered from the cowboy's porch. He looked at her torn dress, exhausted boots, and the small bundle pressed against her chest. Then he opened the door wider and said the one thing she never expected. Come inside. We'll figure out the rest together. Neither Willa Bryce nor Weston Hale knew that simple invitation would change both their lives forever. It was September 1884 in Juniper Flat, Wyoming. Territory and evening was settling over the mountains when Willa reached Weston's ranch. Her dress had once been respectable, but weeks of travel had ruined it. Her dark curls had escaped their pins, dust covered her face, and her boots were nearly worn through. She had walked the final 6 miles after the last ride she could afford ended. All she carried was a cloth bundle containing her mother's sewing kit, a small photograph, and a few personal things. Her money was gone. Her family was behind her. She had nowhere else to turn. Weston was 30, quiet, broad-shouldered, and accustomed to an empty house. 6 years earlier, a terrible barn fire had taken both his parents while he was away delivering cattle. Since then, he had rebuilt the ranch almost entirely alone. He rarely spoke about his grief, but the silence it left behind had become part of him. When Willa appeared at his door, he recognized something in her eyes that needed no explanation. "I'm sorry to trouble you," she said. "I saw your lamp from the road. I don't have anywhere else to go." Weston studied her for a moment, then stepped aside. "You'd better come in." He fed her before asking questions. Only after she finished a warm plate of stew did he ask what had brought her so far from home. Willa finally told him the truth. Her mother had died months earlier, leaving her with a cruel stepfather named Harlan Croft. Harlan had accumulated gambling debts to a wealthy lender, Otis Vane. When the debt became impossible to repay, Otis offered a bargain. He would erase what Harlan owed if Willa agreed to marry him. Willa refused. Harlan made it clear that her choice meant nothing to him. So she fled Nebraska, traveling west with only what she could carry. She had hoped to find a distant relative in Wyoming, but the old address led to strangers. With no money left, she kept walking until she saw Weston's lamp. Weston listened without judgment. "You can stay in the spare room," he finally said. "I need help around here. I'll pay you a fair wage. That isn't charity." Willa stared at him, almost unable to believe it. For the first time, someone was offering her safety without demanding something in return. "You don't even know me," she whispered. Weston nodded. "True, but you walked 6 miles in church boots to reach my door. That tells me enough for tonight." For Willa, it began a life she never expected before this. Willa quickly became part of the rhythm of Weston's ranch, though neither of them called it that. She learned which horses were stubborn, which fences needed attention, and how to keep the kitchen garden alive beneath Wyoming's unforgiving weather. Weston had expected her to need time, but she surprised him. She worked hard without complaining, and soon the neglected garden behind the house was producing vegetables again. One afternoon, while clearing weeds, Willa discovered the remains of an old rose bush. "My mother used to say anything worth keeping was worth repairing," she told Weston when he asked why she was smiling. Maybe she was right. Weston looked at the garden and then at Willa. He understood that she was not only repairing plants, she was slowly rebuilding herself. Their days became easier together. Weston taught her to ride properly, and Willa taught him that a house could feel different when someone cared enough to make it warm. He began talking more than he had in years. She began sleeping without waking at every sound outside. For the first time since escaping Nebraska, Willa stopped expecting every wagon on the road to carry Harlan Croft. But danger had not forgotten her. In late October, a traveling merchant named Silas Pike arrived in Juniper Flat carrying cloth, needles, and news from distant towns. That evening, Weston returned with a serious expression. "Someone has been asking about you," he said. Willa's hands froze. "Who?" "A man matching your stepfather's description. He says he's searching for a young woman with dark curly hair who came west from Nebraska. Willa's fear returned. It isn't just Harlan, she whispered. Otis Vane will be behind it. He won't accept losing what he thinks he purchased. Weston remained calm. Tell me everything. So she did. She explained that Otis was not merely wealthy. He was ruthless, patient, and accustomed to collecting debts through fear. Harlan wanted her returned because her escape had embarrassed him. Otis wanted her because he considered her part of the bargain. They'll come, Willa said. And when they do, I don't know what I'll do. Weston looked directly at her. Whatever you decide, you won't face it alone. That night, Willa watched the dark road from the porch. Weston joined her and finally told her about the fire that had destroyed his family. I spent 6 years convincing myself I liked the quiet, he admitted. Then you arrived. Willa turned toward him. Weston continued. I'm not asking you to stay because you need somewhere safe. I'm saying I'd like you to stay because this place feels different with you here. Her heart tightened. I don't know how to stay for a reason other than having nowhere else. Weston smiled. Then take your time. Everything worth building takes time. Soon, the road would bring the people. Willa feared most back. 10 days later, 4 riders appeared beyond the ridge. The riders arrived Thursday morning. Harlan Croft sat in a hired wagon beside Otis Vane, while 2 hired men followed behind them. Weston saw them coming and walked into the yard before they reached the house. Willa stood just behind the doorway, frightened but determined not to hide. Harlan climbed down and pointed toward her. I'm here for my stepdaughter. Weston's voice remained steady. She isn't property. She stays because she chooses to. Otis stepped forward, brushing dust from his expensive coat. This is a private family matter. You have no reason to interfere. Weston looked him in the eye. The moment you rode onto my land demanding a grown woman, it became my concern. The hired men moved closer, hoping intimidation would settle the matter. Weston did not step back. He had already sent word to the sheriff when he first saw the wagon approaching. It was a gamble because he did not know exactly when help would arrive, but he knew fear would give Otis an advantage if he allowed it. The sheriff is on his way, Weston said. You can explain to him why a moneylender traveled this far to collect another man's debt by claiming a woman as payment. Otis's confidence briefly disappeared. Minutes later, the sheriff arrived with neighbors who had heard the commotion. Harlan shouted about family rights, but the sheriff quickly made one thing clear. Willa was a grown woman, free to live wherever she pleased. Otis had no legal claim over her. You'll leave, the sheriff ordered, and I suggest you remember that people talk in places like this. Your reputation may travel farther than you do. Harlan and Otis finally turned their horses around. When they disappeared beyond the ridge, Willa finally breathed. That evening she found Weston repairing a fence. You lied about the sheriff being close, she said. Weston nodded. I needed them to believe help was coming before they decided to test how many men they had against one. Willa smiled through tears. You didn't have to make my trouble yours. Weston put down his tools. Maybe it stopped being your trouble alone the night you knocked on my door. Willa looked toward the house, then at the man who had given her safety without asking for anything in return. When I first arrived, I said I had nowhere else to go, she said. I don't feel that way anymore. Weston waited. I'm staying because I want this life, this ranch, and you, if you still want me here. His expression softened. I've wanted that for a while. Willa stepped closer, and for the first time she knew she was not running toward a place. She was choosing a home. Their love began with kindness, a warm meal, an open door, and a man giving a frightened stranger a chance. Together they rebuilt the ranch, planted roses, and filled the silent house with laughter. Willa had found a future she could finally choose.